Right, I thought I'd just give an update to the video I posted yesterday about early RF with Marauder. Saw there were a couple comments on Reddit about it, um, thinking that it was going to be difficult to sustain as it took life nodes. And that's just not the case, so I wanted to clarify that for anyone who is following along. So, after the video that I showed yesterday, the next two nodes I took were going to Heart of the Warrior, because Heart of the Warrior is the best life node on the tree right now. It's actually even better than Constitution because it has the flat plus 10. And I've pretty much just been developing the tree as naturally as I think as you would with any sort of RF character. These are all nodes that I would take anyway, so I don't really feel like I was completely bending myself, and out of proportion to build to get to RF early. The only nodes that I won't have in the end are these four so far. So you just take that early so you can go to RF at 16, and we'll drop those as we transition from a flat life based RS to a percentage based RF. So what I mean by that is when you start playing an RF character, just if you're thinking about the degen, you're taking 90% of your life per second as fire damage. And if you have 1% of resistance or 1% of regenerated life, that's about the same. That is the same thing for a righteous fire character in terms of calculating the degen. It matters a little bit with map mods because you could have a map mod that's minus to maximum resistance, or you could have a map mod that's reduced life regeneration, and then it matters which is which. But when you're talking about a percentage based, what I mean is the percentage of fire resistance and the percentage of life regeneration you have. So like this node, Warrior's Blood, has 1.8% of life per second. And you need, I think it's around 22%. I would have to check the exact math on that. I'm not entirely sure. Between overcapped, additional max fire res and regen to make up for all the damage that you're taking from Righteous Fire if you have no other sources of regeneration, such as flat regeneration. So if you have 100 life or you have 10,000 life, 1% regen or 1% additional fire resistance is going to work equally well in terms of sustaining. But at the beginning, flat life is super good because, if you have 100 life and you're gaining 10 life a second, well, that's a node that says 10% life regeneration per second, essentially. Your life's not going to be that low. It's probably going to be more like 350 at level 16 if you follow the tree that I showed. But it's still going to be substantially better than percentage based. So what you're doing as you level the character is you're switching from sustaining RF through flat life to sustaining it through percentage regeneration and increased maximum fire res. So what I did after the video from yesterday, besides taking some life, is I just continued down here. I got my +1 to all max res down here. It also gives me some flat armor, which makes you very tanky in the early game. And then coming up here, I go here, and I took another % of maximum fire res, continued traveling up, and finally we get to our first damage nodes, which sounds like it would be painful, but when you realize that Righteous Fire is basically just supplemental damage when you're at this low level, I mean, you have a melee skill and you have Righteous Fire, so you're just like throwing on an additional 300 damage, fire damage per second to anything nearby, which is quite nice. So you have that and just whatever else you're leveling with. But here we have our first true damage nodes for fire. So we get this damage multiplier time and Arsonist, which is a great Righteous Fire node because it gives you fire damage over time multiplier, which is a key part of our scaling. And we get a regeneration of life. And we get that on this little node as well. And I think it's just barely worth keeping, even on a pretty complete tree. Because you get fire damage and you get some regen. Once you're like way over on regen, you'll probably want to drop it, but there's nothing wrong with it. It just goes to fire. So I'm just pathing up here. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to take some of this damage. I'll take some of this life, and I'm going to come through here, get this life, come over here, get this elemental damage. And what we're heading for up here are some of these fire damage nodes. So we got Holy Fire. We're going to get some life here. We're going to get some more fire damage here. So that's sort of the future of the character. And I haven't had any issue as far as continuing to level. Right now I'm level 34. I'm just about to go get my ascendancy. I'm definitely not a tryhard when it comes to leveling. So I'm not setting any speed records, but probably if you're looking at an RF build, you're not really looking to set speed records. But anyway, once I get the ascendancy, it's going to be like, I'm not even going to have to think about it. I'm basically already not thinking about it, but once I get my ascendancy, I'll have endurance charges. And endurance charges, I believe it's 0.5 per point. I could be wrong. I'm not 100% sure on that. Of life regen per endurance charge. And then there's some regen as well if you're going Chieftain, and if you're going Juggernaut. I don't think there's any additional life regen, but you do get your endurance charges quite easily. So I saw some people talking about, like, well, why would you go Marauder for Righteous Fire? And I don't understand the objection, really. To me, Chieftain is comfortably the best ascendancy for Righteous Fire right now. Now, my goals are not necessarily going to be the goals of every player. My favorite event in all of PoE is the Gauntlet, so I'm usually looking forward to a build that I'm going to play there. So I'm thinking a lot more defensively based than most folks. So if you could get more damage on an Inquisitor, no doubt, but also you'd give up a ton of tankiness, a ton of defensiveness. So for me, what I've looked at, the best two ascendancies are both in Marauder. After Chieftain, I would probably take Juggernaut. And then after that, I would probably consider Trickster. And then finally, I would land out on Inquisitor, which I know is what some other streamers are playing. But I think they're all softcore streamers. So anyway, these are just some of my thoughts on early RF. I'll just show you my gear. It's incredibly scuffed. I mean, I'm playing solo self-found and not really paying a great deal of attention, but I'll just show you the relevant things. We still have a few of these flat life mods. So we got one on the helmet. We've got one on the ring. We've got one on the boots. We've got one on the gloves. So we got 4 of those flat life nodes. That's really all the relevant stuff. We still have vitality going. I'm just leveling it up as I level up. I haven't bothered turning on Purity of Fire yet. I have it in my links leveling, I think. But it doesn't give you any max res until a higher level than this, so it's not really relevant to have on the character unless you're worried about hitting your resistance at all, which hasn't been an issue for me so far. So just one more look at the character. Level 34, about to grab the Ascendancy. We got 80 max fire res, pretty comfortable resistances just because we're naturally getting it on the tree as we're grabbing maximum resistances. And yeah, that's the update on the character. Have not even had the slightest hiccup in terms of sustaining Righteous Fire. And I'll let you know in another video if it does become an issue, but right now it hasn't been one. One last thing to mention is actually this build, even though I'm talking a lot about Righteous Fire, is not actually intended to necessarily be a Righteous Fire build in the end. I just thought it was very interesting that I could go into it early. And I would definitely consider playing it even in the Gauntlet, because I think Righteous Fire got a very significant buff this league with the gem changes, but what it's probably going to be is a Discharge Ignite Chieftain, but the early tree for those can be identical, basically, so it's not really an issue for me to transfer one to the other. And after I get the Ascendancy, I will probably be doing both. I'll probably just be running around. I'll probably actually ascend into Juggernaut, because they get the endurance charges a little bit easier than the Chieftain right away. You just have to let yourself get hit a couple times, but that's not really an issue. You just take a little bit of damage. If you've ever played a Discharge Juggernaut, you know that it's fine. You just get hit a little bit and you don't care. It's not going to really affect you. And then you have these big discharges going off every couple seconds, and then in between you have Righteous Fire just burning everything up, so it works quite well. I played this in, I think it was the first ever Gauntlet, and got to level 90 reasonably comfortably with it. That was in Heist League, I want to say. So it is definitely a working build. If anyone has interest in following it, I could probably post a guide. But anyway, that's all. Just giving you guys the update on early Righteous Fire Marauder. All right, I'm out.